You are looking at the feet of a man who has been running for 36 hours straight. No brakes, no shoes, no GPS. Beneath his feet, volcanic stone 20 million years old. Around him, a canyon system 4 times larger and deeper than the Grand Canyon. At the heart of this stone labyrinth, a civilization that chose this impossible place as home and never left. Welcome to the Barrancas del Cobre. Welcome to the Mexico that doesn't exist in travel guides. Welcome to the world of the Rarámuri, the light feet, the people who discovered centuries ago that running isn't a sport. It's a prayer. It's a weapon. It's the only thing that can keep the world in motion. But why is this man running? There's no finish line in sight, no prize waiting, no television camera at the bottom of the canyon. There's something far older, something modern science still can't fully name. You'll understand, but first we need to understand the stone. 20 million years ago, this land did not exist. Where today stand the deepest canyons in Mexico, there was a flat volcanic plateau, a tableland of lava and ash accumulated over eons of geological fury. The Sierra Madre Occidental wasn't born from a single earthquake. It was born from 1,000 earthquakes, from repeated eruptions over millions of years that piled layers of rhyolite, basalt, and ignimbrite, rocks forged in the heat of the Earth's mantle, to a thickness of 3 kilometers. Each layer you see on these walls is a chapter of time, not human time, geological time, deep time. The time in which continents move, oceans are born and die, and life reinvents itself from scratch. And then, the Earth did something extraordinary. It opened up. Tectonic extension force, the same force that opened the Red Sea, that slowly pulls Africa apart, began to tear this plateau from the inside out. The ground gave way. Fractures became valleys. Valleys became rivers. And the rivers, the Urique, the Batopilas, the Sinforosa, spent millions of years doing what water always does, cutting, deepening, sculpting. The result is what you see now, a system of over 60,000 square kilometers of interconnected canyons. The Urique Canyon, the deepest, plunges 1,179 meters below the plateau, nearly 300 meters deeper than the Grand Canyon at its deepest point. But the statistic doesn't capture what this place does to the body of those who visit it. At the top of the plateau, it can snow. At the bottom of the same canyon, in a straight line, there are mango trees, orchids, tropical snakes. The temperature can vary 40 degrees Celsius between the rim and the floor of the same abyss. The Barrancas del Cobre aren't a landscape. They are multiple worlds stacked on top of each other, separated by stone walls and 20 million years of geological time. It was into these walls that an entire people descended and never came back out. The stone that created this geological hell will soon reveal itself to be the most efficient shield ever built by any human civilization. More efficient than any wall, more efficient than any army. The name they use for themselves is Rarámuri. The most accepted translation is those who run with their feet, or simply the light feet. It's not a nickname, it's an ontological definition, a cosmology. For the Rarámuri, the act of running is inseparable from the act of existing. When the Spanish arrived in the Sierra Madre in the 16th century, they found a people who had already lived on this arid plateau for centuries. And the Spanish did what they always did. They brought missions, they brought mines, and they brought chains. The Rarámuri Wars against the colonizers lasted decades. There were 2 great revolts, in 1648 and 1698, in which the Rarámuri destroyed missions and temporarily expelled the conquerors. But the pressure was relentless. The region's silver and copper mines demanded workers, and slave labor was the method. So, the Rarámuri did something no army could force the Spanish to do. They went down. They took their children, their corn, their animals, and their memory into the most inaccessible fissures of the Sierra Tarahumara, to places where horses couldn't descend, to where the weight of Spanish armor became a death sentence. The stone, that same violent, sharp, vertically impossible stone, became the most efficient shield ever built by any civilization. For 500 years, geological isolation did what no treaty ever would. It preserved an intact culture. Today, between 65,000 and 70,000 Rarámuri still live in the Sierra Tarahumara. Many inhabit natural caves and rock shelters, not out of poverty, but by choice. The stone has kept them warm for generations. Why replace it? In their scattered settlements, with no roads, no internet, no phone lines, the only form of communication between villages has always been the most natural. Someone runs there. Before talking about running, you need to understand tesguino. Tesguino is a fermented blue corn beer, thick, slightly sour, low in alcohol, that the Rarámuri drink in ceremonies called tesguinadas. It's not a vice, it's a social infrastructure. Tesguino is the liquid that transforms work into community, running into prayer, and neighbors into family. When the Jesuit missionaries tried to ban the tesguinadas in the 17th century, correctly understanding that they were the cement of Rarámuri cultural resistance, the people rebelled with a violence that surprised the colonizers. The corn beer survived the Spanish Empire. It is still fermented today in the same clay vessels, by the same hands. But tesguino isn't just celebration. On the night before a sacred race, a race that can last 48 continuous hours, the Rarámuri drink, smoke, and sing. And the team's healer, the shaman, does something modern. Science can't explain. He scatters powdered bone from the dead along the course to attract fatigue onto the opponents. This race, called Rarajipari, isn't a marathon. It's a spiritual war, and it's still alive today. Rarajipari has no exact translation. The closest word would be the kickball race, but that would be like calling the mass the distribution of bread. It's a sacred game between two teams from rival villages. Each team kicks a wooden ball while running. Hands are not allowed, the ball cannot stop, and the total distance of the race can reach 300 kilometers, contested without pause, day and night, over living rock terrain in the canyons. Let's talk about what's happening inside this man's body. A typical Rarámuri runner in the Rarajipari wears huarachis, sandals made from old tire soles and goatskin leather straps. The sole thickness is less than a centimeter. By comparison, a modern running shoe has between 2 and 4 centimeters of cushioning. And yet, researchers from Harvard University studying the Rarámuri discovered something counterintuitive. They get injured less. Rarámuri biomechanics reverse decades of sports science. Running barefoot, or with minimal soles, forces the runner to land on the midfoot, not the heel. This posture reduces joint impact by up to 70% compared to the standard heel strike promoted by modern shoes. Rarámuri feet from childhood develop plantar musculature that makes the sole a shock absorption system more sophisticated than any polymer manufactured by Nike. Would you dare take a barefoot step on these stones? Type 1 if yes, 2 if no. We want to see it in the comments. But the body is only half the equation. The other half is the mind. Researchers from Harvard University who followed Rarámuri runners in ultramarathons observed something disturbing by Western standards. They don't train. They don't follow periodization plans. They don't monitor heart rate. They don't calculate nutritional macros. On the eve of a 100-mile race, a Rarámuri runner might drink tesguino all night and smoke tobacco, and still beat professional American runners who spent months preparing. In 1928, 2 Rarámuri runners were taken to Paris to compete in the Olympic marathon. They didn't know the concept of a marathon. After completing the 42 kilometers of the race, they walked out protesting, "Too short, too short." For them, the race had barely begun. In 2019, at the inaugural Ultra X Mexico, Rarámuri runner Miguel Lara, a goat farmer, destroyed the best professional ultramarathoners in the world. He had arrived at the site by walking several days on foot through the mountains. The Rarámuri psychology of long-distance running can be described in one word from their language: Korima. Korima is the spirit of generosity without expectation of return, giving without calculating what comes back. In running, Korima transforms into something that Western neuroscientists are only beginning to name, an expanded flow state, where the boundary between runner and terrain disappears. The foot no longer feels the stone as an obstacle, it reads it and responds. But there's something researchers can't explain through biomechanics or psychology alone, a dimension that belongs to Rarámuri spirituality, and that is being threatened by forces that this time the stone can't hold back. For 500 years, the stone was enough. The geological isolation of the Barrancas del Cobre functioned as the greatest natural defense system ever built, not by engineers, but by tectonics. The Spanish colonizers couldn't get in. The Jesuit missionaries partially succeeded, but they left. The Mexican government for centuries simply ignored that there was anything in there. The stone was enough, until it wasn't. The Sinaloa cartel and associated groups discovered 2 decades ago that the Barrancas del Cobre are the perfect place for growing marijuana and poppies, precisely for the same reason the Rarámuri chose them as refuge, inaccessibility and the absence of the state. Entire villages were pressured to abandon their lands. Some were absorbed into trafficking networks, either as mules, carrying drugs along the same trails their ancestors used to run, or as laborers on the plantations. Traditional Rarajipari races were cancelled because the course passed through lands controlled by armed groups. Irma Chavez Cruz was the first Rarámuri woman to run the Boston Marathon. She went to Boston not to compete, she went to speak. About stolen lands. About children who are forgetting how to run because the traditional course is now a trafficking zone. About the slow erasure of a culture that survived everything, except the modern world arriving all at once. There is also the drought. The Barrancas del Cobre have always been arid on the plateau and humid at the bottom. But the extreme droughts of recent decades, accelerated by the global climate crisis, are drying up the rivers that always defined the boundaries between villages and killing the corn crops that are the base of the Rarámuri diet and ritual tesguino. Without corn, there is no tesguino. Without tesguino, there is no tesguinada. Without tesguinada, there is no community. And without community, the race loses its meaning. But there is something the cartels and the drought still haven't managed to destroy, the race itself. Because the race doesn't live in the lands, it lives in the feet. It lives in the muscle memory of every Rarámuri child who learned to read the stone before learning to read anything else. A culture that walks is sedentary. A culture that runs is literally impossible to surround. The threat is real, but the Rarámuri response to threats has always been the same: run deeper. Let's go back to the opening question. Why does a man run 300 kilometers barefoot at the bottom of the deepest canyon on Earth? It's not for competition. It's not for records, it's not for physical survival, though the race is also that. The answer lies in Rarámuri cosmology, which says the world must be kept in motion, that the sun doesn't rise on its own, that the rain doesn't come on its own, that there is a sacred contract between humans and the cosmos, and that this contract is honored through physical movement, through running, dancing, collective work. Running, for the Rarámuri, is the most honest way to pray. Not with words. With calloused feet that beat against ancient stone and say, "We're still here, we're still here, we're still here." The Barrancas del Cobre are 20 million years old. The Rarámuri have been here for at least 1,000 of them. And as long as there's a calloused foot capable of striking this stone, as long as there's a wooden ball being kicked through the darkness between 2 rival villages, as long as there's an old woman fermenting blue corn in a clay pot that has seen 10 generations, this civilization cannot be erased, because civilizations that run don't stay still long enough to die. This episode took you to the bare feet of a civilization that chose the abyss as home. If the Barrancas del Cobre called to you, the next destination might be even more unsettling. An island in the South Atlantic where Napoleon Bonaparte spent his final days trapped on a rock, 2,000 kilometers from the nearest continent, and where isolation wasn't protection, but punishment. St. Helena. Episode 007, already available on the channel. Every view is a vote for the kind of world we want to preserve. Could you run 1 kilometer barefoot on these stones? Type 1 for yes, 2 for no. We want to see the count. Share this with someone who needs to understand that the impossible is relative.